everybody. Welcome to the Mud and Rib podcast. I'm here with my husband, Guy Caskey, and we're ready to get started today. How are you, Guy?
Good. Looking forward to talking about today's topic.
What is today's topic?
Talking about side-by-side leadership, specifically in our marriage relationship and really how we live out oneness side by side.
Yeah, I think we need to prepare everybody that this could be like drinking from a fire hose today, because we have a lot we could say about this. So who knows, maybe it'll be two parts.
Sure.
We'll see how much we can tackle today. So as we think about side-by-side leadership in marriage, I was thinking about a story before I met you. This is after I came to Christ and before I met you. I was in a relationship with someone, really good guy. But there was one day I realized I don't think that we would co-labor together very well. That's the only word I had in my vocabulary at that time. I thought about being in the trenches together, and that was both in ministry and just in life. Like, I felt like we had different views about the male-female relationship and marriage that would potentially affect us in a bad way. And so obviously that didn't work out because I'm here with you.
Hey,
and
that's a good thing.
And so, but that made me think about this whole idea of how, even if you're single, this is important to look at and think about what it is you're looking for in a spouse and some of the ways to evaluate that. But also as a married couple, no matter where you are, you're already one. If you got married, if you're in Christ and you are married, you are one.
Right,
so what do you have to say about that?
Well, first, for me, in what I was looking for is that I'm very intuitive, and I just intuitively knew that God had placed a pioneering call upon my life. And I really didn't understand exactly what that meant, but I knew that he called me to something different. And I had a desire, even at a young age in my early 20s, to one, make disciples, but two, that I wanted to start churches in a very different way than what had traditionally been done. And the stereotypical like ministers or church planter's wife was someone who worked with the children and played the piano. And I'm not being critical of that, but that just was not what I was looking for. I was looking for someone who would pioneer with me, who would get in the trenches with me. Which
is good, because I was not a piano player, and working with children probably wasn't my top priority at that time.
We're not being critical of that, are
No,
we?
absolutely not. And I think this is a good time to say that we recognize, as people are listening, that we are unique in our gifting, and not everyone's going to be like us. And so whatever your uniquenesses are, you just need to learn how to be one and work that out in your marriage. This is just the uniquenesses that we share. And so we're going to tell stories about that, but each of you have your own story.
Yeah, that's important to know, that it's kind of like each of us have a fingerprint. There's things that are unique to us, but then there's also all of us have like there are same responsibilities that in tasks that we need to live out as followers of Christ. But there's also a lot of things that we need to define and understand in order to work together on our oneness and really, we're going to use connect, communicate, and collaborate. And so there's a lot involved in our understanding of that.
So let's unpack just a little bit. You said there's certain tasks, missionary tasks, so to speak, that all of us are called to do. How is that different than maybe, let's say, gray areas, things that maybe we don't all have to do?
Right. So all of us need to love God, love people, make disciples that make disciples. And so some would refer to that all of us are called to the core tasks of the mission. That is praying for people, loving them in such a way that you desire them to know Christ. So you share your story and his story with them, and you help them understand and teach them to follow the commands of Christ, to get on mission with other believers and grow. And hopefully we are developing disciples and leaders. And that's something that all of us need to be a part of. It's together. We have an individual responsibility, but also it's to work together. So it's a team. It's not just all on you, but you need to start taking responsibility for those things.
Okay. So maybe we should define what this side-by-side leadership looks like. I have notes here to help us stay on track today. So kind of defined side-by-side leadership is equal value. So we both have equal value. different strengths,
Right.
but we're still unified in the direction that we're going, which is this missionary task that you're talking
Sure.
about. And that could be anything. We're also unified in the direction we're going with raising our kids, things like that too, not just this missionary task,
Right.
correct? That's compared to some people view leadership in marriage as more of someone's in front, someone's behind. So one is always leading and one is always following. Strong relational connection, but not a shared mission, which I would say that right there, a strong relational connection, but not a shared mission, is one of the things that I talk about most with young couples, especially women that I coach specifically, where I think maybe they don't have a lot in common, but if they had the missionary task in common, then their marriage would be able to be healthier than it is.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you're saying that being on mission can help in developing the relationship piece, the relational piece?
I do. I think there's some people that are just truthfully so polar opposite in their likes, dislikes, gifts, but because they were opposite, they kind of attracted to each other.
Right.
And so maybe it's a little bit more of a struggle relationally. But I think when you have something like we're going to be about the mission,
Mm-hmm.
that it gives you something to unify around. And so then I think it helps marriages to become what they can be, even if they're
So
different.
we need to ask the why. Well, why do we exist? What is our purpose? What is our mission together?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go back. So when you're talking about side by side leadership, we're not saying that there's not any leadership or that I'm not a leader or that
Correct.
you're not a leader, right?
That's correct.
Right. So one of the things we're saying is that my role in that to me, we believe that the role of a man and any leader is to engage in such a way to speak life, like Ephesians 5 says, to wash your wife with the water of the word, to speak her identity in Christ, the truth of that over her, and raise her up as a co-laborer, a co-image bearer, to take the image of Christ, the glory of God, to the ends of the earth. And it starts with where you are. And that means that a leader is someone who raises someone up to shoulder height or side by side. And that's what we're talking about. And that's why I call you my rib, because you are from my side, that we are to be side by side. And my role is to bring you up as a co-laborer and to remind you of who you are in Christ.
And I think that's one of the things that I love so much about you is I've never felt as though I'm beneath you, that I'm insignificant. I've always felt important. I've always felt like you valued the fact that I had strong leadership skills and weren't intimidated by that. You have always helped me feel like we're equals in partnership in this. And so I think that's made a big difference in our marriage.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm grateful for you as well. I just see the way that Jesus led. I mean, even when he invited Mary into his feet as a disciple was a big deal, even biblically during that time. And I love how Jesus is constantly lifting people up to understand their significance and their identity as image bearers and as children of the King, that we can become born again children of the King, and we have the joy of knowing that when our King looks at us, that he sees himself in us. And that's a beautiful thing. And our job in leadership is to remind one another of that identity. And that's how we lift people up.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the key thing that you've done in our marriage. Because when we got married, I really struggled with my identity, and you really spoke life into me over around that area. And I think that's really what has made a huge difference in me being confident in who I am, where I'm going, who God's made me to be, and to act on those things and not live kind of in a retreat mode of I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm grateful for us is we made a lot of mistakes, as we shared on our story on the earlier episodes, of that we were a hot mess, but we were
Yes,
fortunate enough to come to Christ at a pretty early age.
that's
We
right.
weren't teenagers, but at least we were in our early 20s. And as a result of that, we entered into our relationship with at least moving in a good direction with some good foundation in our lives. And so we are going to talk about, what do you do when you have to unlearn things, and you're trying to deconstruct something, and you're trying to unlearn so that you can learn and build a marriage that's built upon oneness and being side by side, that you truly are connecting, communicating, and collaborating the way God designed you to.
Yeah, maybe let's dive into this whole starting with the connect piece.
Okay.
What does that mean to connect?
Well, for me, one is the connection is to recognize if you are two people in Christ and you are married and you have covenanted with him, then you already are connected. You are one.
So even if you don't feel like it.
Exactly. It's not about how you feel. It's about aligning your feelings and everything, mind, will, and emotions with the reality of who you are. So it starts with understanding that our connection is based upon the oneness that God has already built into our lives and the way he sees us. And so then we start moving towards, in our actions and our behaviors, our doing, and all that begins to align with our being, or you could say that's our identity, our oneness. And so then how do we start acting that out in our behavior, in our attitude, in our actions, and it will impact our emotions.
That makes me think of, we've known several people that in their marriage, they often wrestled with, I'm not sure you're really the one. How do you think that affects someone's marriage if one spouse is thinking that all the time?
Yeah, I mean, if you've covenanted with them, they're the one, no matter what your feeling is. That's one of the biggest problems, is that too much of our lives are dominated and dictated by circumstances and feelings rather than the reality of who we are and our identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's undermining. That's the kind of undermining that we're talking about. If you continue to believe that lie, the enemy will kill, steal, and destroy the oneness and the function and the reality of what Christ wants to reveal in you and in your marriage.
I think it's some of the ways that we've worked on just this being connected is really having each other's back. And that doesn't mean at the like not recognizing truth.
Right.
So an example of that would be if, let's say, we were out in public and maybe I said something that was not completely the most proper thing to say. Maybe not proper, but just maybe it wasn't the best thing to say, which I would be known to do because I'm very direct and say things I shouldn't say. So, but would you correct me in front of people?
In most cases, probably not. There may be something, if the offense was that you like really hurt or offended someone, I might say, Kelly, I think you need to apologize for that. There may be an instant like that, but often I would want to bring you aside later and talk to you about it. I certainly would not want to shame or embarrass you. One of the things that we do is we tap on each other's foot during times like that. If one of us is going off the rails by talking too much,
getting too intense,
we kind of step on one another's foot. I actually learned that from an older elder who would be with me in meetings, and I would start getting all passionate and intense with people around the table, and he would start stepping on my foot.
Yeah. And that's just kind of a way to have each other's back because we know each other's weaknesses. We're trying to help each other out. And so we're not saying that we shouldn't be truthful with each other, but we just try our best not to shame or embarrass in front of other people. We'll even if it's quickly saying like, hey, let's talk for a second, just saying, hey, I don't think that was the best thing for you to say. You might want to consider apologizing. And hopefully I would be quick to say, oh my gosh, you're right. That was not the best thing to say. So I just think about that as one story. And I also think about, we had a neighbor that,
oh Lord.
that every time you would go play golf with him, he would come home and start saying, oh yeah, a guy was saying all these bad things about you. And the thing, because I knew the depth of our relationship, I was actually able to say to him, you're wrong. I know he would never say those things. And I confidently believed that. And it was true. But he was trying to actually, in a joking way, but undermine our relationship. And if I was insecure about our relationship or things weren't great between us, that would have been something that could have really caused a problem in our relationship where I could have started believing lies.
Yeah, an antagonizer. So we all know the antagonizer, or the agitator that we call Mr. Maytag. It's just certain temperaments trying to get under our skin. But the reality is that I have Kelly's back. I don't talk trash about her. Now I have accountability partners that I talk about struggles, but I always talk about how I honor Kelli, how much I love her, how much I am committed to her. And so I don't talk negatively about her or undermine our oneness to another. I may talk about struggles we're having, fights we get into, but I also take responsibility for my part and don't try to cast the blame all on her. And I never just publicly demean her. I want to build her up in front of others.
Yeah, I think that's the big one is we just don't criticize publicly.
Right.
And so I think that's really important. And yeah, there's so much to be could be said about that, but we'll continue moving on. So how do we start? Communicates our second kind of word we're focusing on. So how do we start moving toward oneness in our communication?
Well, we talked a little bit about that, but one is we begin to communicate who we are, that when we don't, some of the things that we do is often we blame others for how we feel. So we start learning how to take responsibility for our actions, for our emotions. So I never say, you made me feel this way,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not a victim. I take responsibility for my own emotions and thoughts. And so I say, this is how I feel. This is what I think. And so when I'm going to, I don't say, you did this and you made me do such and such. I say, this is how I feel. I would like for us to talk about this. This is what I think. I would like to hear what you think, instead of coming in and attacking you by using you statements. I take responsibility for my thoughts and feelings, and that allows us to dialogue about it and discuss and hopefully discover where we need to go.
So it'd be okay to say, when you do this, I feel.
Yes.
But so I'm still able to address maybe what the action is,
Yes.
how it made me feel. And I'd like to talk about how we could do things differently.
Right.
Correct?
Yes. So part of this is in learning the listening is key and the communicating is key. How well do I listen? Do I really listen in communication, or am I listening to respond? And that's a big piece. And then whenever I do communicate, am I taking responsibility for my thoughts and feelings, or am I placing them upon you?
And I think one of the things that we learned to do pretty early, thanks to our people who investing in us, is just repeating back what we heard the other person say. Is this what you
Yeah.
said? Is this what you meant
Yes.
with what you
Yeah.
said? Because you can actually regurgitate what someone said,
Yep.
but not really understand the intent and meaning behind it. So I think making sure that when you communicate with each other, that you are repeating back, this is what I heard you say, and what you're repeating back is the meaning behind what you heard
Sure.
them say.
Can you say what you mean and mean what you say are pretty important principles
Yes.
in this process. And I remember just reflecting back in our early days that I was, I would put like a full court press on you at times to talk about stuff
Mhm.
immediately when we would get in kind of sideways in a conflict. And at that particular time, do you remember this? You
Oh,
couldn't
I
do
did.
it. You couldn't do it in a way that honored our oneness, and it would just turn into a huge conflict. So then we'd have to give you cooling time. And so you would go off and think about it and reflect on it, which is kind of strange to me now, because you were so good on your feet and so good talking in initial situations that could be heated or emotional. It's just weird now, the reflecting back on that.
But I think the reason why is because I was such a hothead, and anger came so quickly and easily. It was really about the anger and the hotheadedness that kept me from talking. And as I've learned how to get that under Christ's control, I can I can more quickly address issues and not have to have cool down time.
That's crazy. I'd completely forgotten about that.
Yeah.
That's just shows your own growth. And we can talk more about just how whenever we get into conflict, there's certain temperaments that can be a little scattered. Even temperaments like my temperament, I can think on my feet and you just press a button and I can answer questions and articulate things, but you get me under heated pressure and I get a little scattered. And it's like your temperament is better under pressure and fire at communicating directions and details. When I start losing that, and it's one of those temperament, just behavioral type of differences in us that does affect our relationship
Yeah.
and all this connecting, communicating, and collaborating. So understanding, and we'll talk more about that, our differences in the uniqueness of kind of our temperament or behavioral styles.
So one of our big stories about not fighting fair, because we have to learn how to fight fair. But
Right.
Guy was the agitator.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
I mean, he was a Maytag agitator. He was a button pusher. And so when we first got married, oh Lord, he would say things that would just be, he would say when I would be acting childish, something like, oh, that's spiritual. And you talk about someone like me who's already a hothead, I would get so angry about that. And one time I was, and I'm also violent in the sense of like, I like to punch things and punch people. And now that's turned into if I punch you, I like you. But before it was if I punch you, I'm mad at you.
Wow.
So I was standing at the top of a stairs in our townhouse. And it was this really steep staircase. And I had, and this is how old I am, I had a bottle of Aquanet hairspray.
It wasn't a bottle, it was a can.
Well, a can. Okay. Big can of Aquanet
like
hairspray.
Metal, hard metal.
Yeah,
can.
not some
Not
chintzy
this thin,
aluminum.
Aluminum we have now.
And so he made me so mad. And as hard as I could, I threw that down the stairs to try to bean him in the head. I missed his head, thankfully.
Yes,
but I wanted to hit him in the head.
I was moving quick.
Let me just say that's not fighting fair. And also saying things like, oh, that's spiritual.
Yeah.
Is not fighting fair either.
Trying to manipulate your partner into godliness or the right actions and attitudes. It's kind of like the anger of man does not bring about the righteousness of God. Neither does the manipulation and agitation of man.
It actually has the opposite effect.
Yes.
Because that just made me madder. It certainly did not help.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. That's like 30 something years ago. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think I've thrown any things in 29 years.
You know, some people have said about women, you know, and I don't want to generalize you women, but if they don't go hysterical, they'll go historical. And that's right there an example of that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm also historical. Early on, that was one of the things you would always say, we're not supposed to keep a record of wrong. Excuse me. And because I would always say, remember when you did this? That's another thing. Oh, yeah. So this is all learning how to fight fair in communication.
Back in 1993 when you said this to me.
That's enough. Okay. So let's talk about some of the tools that we could use to start learning how to understand our differences in communication. And so that we can begin to say, okay, this is why you do what you do. Right. And maybe how do I need to change my communication?
Sure.
The disc is one of them.
Yeah, we use the disc a lot. I mean, there's a lot, that's one we're most familiar with. But there's a lot of different like temperament and behavior evaluation tests, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, et cetera. And of course, then you have our ministry gifts. But we like to use the disc. And so with the disc that you have those that communicate more directly, that their communication is direct and fast and quick. And that would be the D's, and the I's are more influencers. The S's are more steady. The C's are more like conscientious about details. And so some of them are risk assessors and some of them are risk takers. Mm-hmm. The D and the I would be more risk takers, and the S and the C are more risk assessors. So some like to tell and some like to ask questions. That's pretty important. We talked on previous episodes about learning how to ask good questions. Mm-hmm. If you're a teller, you're always trying to tell people the answers. That's the D and the I. And then the S and the C would be more of the question askers.
So this is a perfect example of how conflict can happen, because if you're an influencer or a direct person and you just want to get things done, right, and then someone's asking a bunch of questions, it can become frustrating to you. And there's a lot of dying to self in this process. And I think selfishness is a number one killer in marriage and relationships. But if you're that different, you have to learn, one, to be accepting and know that you need the question asker in your life. Yep. And the question asker also has to be okay with saying, okay, I'm going to trust, we've answered some of my questions, I'm going to trust this risk taking.
Yes.
And be willing to also take risk.
Yep. Because the question asker sometimes can seem like you're using questions to manipulate me towards a direction or an answer.
Right.
And so you've got that going on too. You have in those examples, you have an imploders and exploders. The D and the I's are more exploders. The S and the C's are more imploders.
Meaning that things will
Yeah, they
internalize.
internalize things, and then the others will explode. I use like a skunk or a turtle. The turtle goes inward and blames itself or internalizes things. The skunk sprays everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely a skunk person. Now, of course, there's always a skirtle, where you do a little bit of both, but depending upon your behavior style, and different environments elicit different types of behaviors. So understanding that, one of the ways we describe these different behavior types would be like, if you're on an airplane, you have the pilot and you want the pilot to give a lot of direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the flight attendants, and they are there to influence the environment. You have the passenger who wants things to go very steady, right? And then you have the flight engineer who is calculating the details.
Mm-hmm.
And those are your different types of behaviors or roles on the airplane. And you have people who tend to, in different environments, respond in one of these ways or these
Right.
patterns, and that affects our communication. Some of the patterns tend to communicate really fast, and so you can tell, with me, that I like to talk fast. I like to do things fast, and so you are the same way. So it works really well for us. The only problem with it is it doesn't really work well in Houston traffic, because both of us get frustrated and complain about how slow everybody's
Right.
moving and doing things. And so those are the kind of things that can really affect our relationships and our communication.
Always think about, we're both very intense people. In some ways, this is a good thing. We're both very similar, but
Right.
also it's dangerous because
Right.
we need other people around us to help us know, like, not everybody's like you and you can't be like that all the time.
Sure.
And we were very intense about some conversation we were having. And I think your sister thought maybe we were getting a divorce.
Right.
And I was like, what? We're fine. Like, this is just a normal conversation for us. But just, she's a steady temperament.
Yeah.
And that kind of freaked her out. And it
Yes.
just made me go, oh, we probably shouldn't be like that around other people, because they don't know our different communication styles and that's normal for us.
Sure.
And so we really had to learn how to not just to read the room, know our environment. So it's not only about how we communicate in marriage, but also how that communication affects other people.
For sure. And there's even cultural differences that relate to that. That some cultures just tend to be culturally more gregarious, touchy feely, and then some tend to be more quiet, reserved, and not so touchy feely.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things in this that can impact our marriage, and this communication piece, and learning to deal with our differences and understanding, you know, what is the behavioral style of my spouse, and so maybe I need to slow down a little bit. Maybe I need to ask more questions, or maybe I need to talk to tell more.
Mm-hmm.
So in when we're working with others, like Kristen's on our team, and we're just polar opposites, but she has saved me so many times from asking questions. And there's been so many times I've wanted to get irritated about all the questions that she's asking to clarify things. And I realized, man, I'm glad she asked those questions, because I was getting ready to just full blown just charge into that mess, and I was going to make a mess out of
Right.
it.
Thank goodness.
And yeah, exactly. So that's how we can truly honor and learn and work together for those things. And it's super helpful. And we just got to be aware of that.
I still go back to the fact that when we continue to be selfish and want things our own way and not bend and be flexible in this process, it's
Yes.
just really ruins our oneness.
Yeah.
And so
That's really good. I just think the whole idea of learning to die to self is so important in our relationships. And when we talk about multiplying disciples, that you have to die to multiply. That's what Jesus taught. And clearly in John 12:24, he just said, unless a kernel of wheat dies, basically it will not multiply and reproduce life.
mm-hmm.
And so you and I have to die to so many things in order to have healthy relationships.
I think sometimes we think that when we die to things, we're giving up our own self. Like, I don't want to give up who I am.
Right, right, right.
And so I, I just think it's important to acknowledge this is not saying don't be who you are.
Right.
It's saying that And just, we can say this emphatically, we've been married 34 years, going on 35, that dying to certain things has not in any way robbed me of me being who I am.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, it's given more room for me to be who I am as we've learned to work together, and it's better. So you just need to know it's worth dying to some of these things and being flexible and being willing to learn and um, just modify our behavior through the power of Christ in our marriage, and it is better.
Yeah, and you're discovering your true identity, and you're finding significance and security that allows you to let go of a lot of the petty stuff that you hold on to. That's what we're talking about. I'm not talking about not having boundaries. There are clearly things you need to say yes to and things you need
That's
to
a
say
great
no
point,
to.
because there's so much abuse too that we also don't want to sound like we're saying be a doormat.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that we are huge proponents of is we teach other people how we need to be treated. And so we treat others the way we want to be treated, and that's how we teach them, and we don't allow them to abuse us or to manipulate us. That's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about is that we are different. And even in different cultures, like if you go back to the Tower of Babel, where it's this story in Genesis 11, I believe, about man wanting to build up and reach up to God on his own. And what God did is he scattered, and there became all these different tongues and cultures. And so that was scattered. And the only way for those tongues and cultures to learn how to come back together, and that's what we have at Pentecost, is learning to consider others and learn about their culture as well, if we're ever going to display the unity, the oneness as Christ followers that he wants us to have. And that means dying to some of my own cultural ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are certain things that are cultural and there's certain things that are biblical. And so when we talk about dying, we're talking about dying to our culture, to cultural ways, selfishness, while at the same time honoring our culture and not losing who we are as people in our identity.
That's good. That's good. I know we need to keep moving forward. So one of the other tools we like to use is love languages. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of the 5 love languages, but just really quickly, what are those 5 love languages?
Let's say we have acts of service, gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, and did I say service?
Physical touch.
Oh, physical touch. Yeah. Physical touch. So there's 5 of them, and they're pretty important. If we like to give love the way we like to receive it. And so it can become a problem if you like to give it in a way that you like to receive it, but that's not how your spouse likes to receive it. So what do I mean by that?
Yeah, what I was going to say, what would be an example of that? Well, for example, for us, like early on, you would buy flowers for me. And it's not that I don't like flowers.
You don't bring me flowers.
But that really wasn't what spoke love to me.
That's for the old people in the back.
That's right. We are old, honey. So I really liked quality time much better. Words of affirmation and quality time are probably my top 2, but really quality time. Like even if I'm running errands, I want you to go with me.
Sure.
I want us to run errands together because I like you.
Right.
I want to be with you.
I like you too.
So that helps. But quality time is important to me.
Right.
So flowers, oh, they were nice, but that's not really what spoke love to me.
Yeah. And that's so much, so important, because then I need to spend time with Kelli. The good thing is I didn't have a problem with that. I like her, like to spend time with her. So that works really good. And I like the fact that I'm not spending a bunch of money on something that dies the next day. So for the practical side of me, I'm like, that's awesome. Now the problem would be is if you liked flowers and I thought that way, that's just a waste, So what do you do in a situation if someone likes to receive gifts and you got a budget and don't have money and certainly don't want to enslave yourself to debt? What do I do?
Is that a topic for today? That's a whole nother. I think you have to find ways to give gifts that don't cost money.
Exactly. So build something, do some ways to create gifts that don't cost a bunch of money.
We didn't have any money when we got married.
Yeah, exactly.
And you would write me notes, you would do things, leave sticky notes around and things like that as a way to do some of those things.
Yes. And to communicate affirmation as well.
Yes.
And words of affirmation.
That's good. So as people start to learn these differences about each other
Right.
in their relationship, they need to talk about it with each other. But I also think that some of these things like I statements or, these different ways of communicating can seem disingenuous in the
Oh yeah.
beginning
Yeah.
because it's kind of like you're practicing.
Yep.
The only way you get better is by practice. But
Yep.
so many times we don't want to practice because it seems disingenuous.
Yeah. All the Gen Xers out there are going, that's so inauthentic. It's so cheesy.
And it does sound that way from time to time. But the only way we're going to get better is to mutually agree. We're going to practice this, no
Yes.
matter how it sounds, until it becomes part of who I am.
Yes.
And that's what I think is happened with us is so much of this we practiced, even though it seemed cheesy or inauthentic
Yep.
or disingenuous or whatever big word you want to use. And but it saved, I mean, I wouldn't say it saved our marriage like we were in the pits, but
Right.
it could have been. We could
Yeah.
have been in the pits.
It's how we've built the foundation
Yes.
of our marriage and has helped us with our intimacy and our influence and really living out our identity.
Yes. So you got to practice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big
Yeah.
takeaway from this is learn what your different communication styles, your love languages are, whatever tool you want to
Yep.
use. There's so many out there. These are just ones
Yes.
we've used. And
Yep.
actually they're kind of old compared to some of the newer ones, but there's plenty out there. You can do these tests online for free.
Yes.
So just go online, Google the DISC profile, Myers-Briggs. You can look up the 5 love languages, and there's actually a test you can do online for that for free. You could even reach out to us. We have that test. We can through our email, and that'll be in the show notes. You can find that from us. But just start there and practice.
Yes.
Those are big things. We have so much still to cover. That was we got connect and communicate. We need to talk about collaborate
Right.
before we need to wrap things up.
Sure.
So how do we live this out? How do we live life on mission? How do we collaborate together? Because it's not just on mission; it's also just in daily tasks.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to define the relationships and define the tasks, whatever they are. We started out defining kind of the task of missions, what some would call like the core missionary task. But we also have to practically figure out what tasks around the house that we're going to do. And again, we're not criticizing traditional gender roles, but you need to figure out if you're going to do it as a team. Are you going to establish where, she does the dishes, he mows the lawn, or do you both do? You and I function a ton as a team. Like even we mow the lawn, I'll get on one tractor, you'll get on another. I'll do the weed eater, you'll do the push mower.
I like to mow.
Yes, exactly. So
on the riding mower. Let's be
exactly.
clear.
It's a match made in heaven. So nothing sexier than having a wife that mows. So it's kind of like the husband that does dishes or vacuums.
Yes.
So those are the kind of things that we even have. I think I can't remember how many tasks are on it, but when we do premarital coaching, we're like, okay, these are all the tasks around a household. Who's going to do what? And why do we do that?
So that everything is clearly established.
Right.
And we've even done it in seasons.
Yes.
So there was a time when I was a stay-at-home mom, and there was a time that I was a full-time working mom, and we were both working, various things, new mom, like with a new baby. And so we've had to reevaluate those things during different seasons. So I say keep that on hand, because at all seasons of life, you might need to reevaluate.
Yep. Yeah. So to us, it was do whatever it takes to trust God to provide, to work, to be free, but also to be free to do the mission. And sometimes that meant us working jobs, different jobs, and you worked and I didn't work as much, or I worked and when the kids were little, we sacrificed a lot for you to stay home with the children.
Mm-hmm.
We just do whatever it takes as a team. That's kind of our approach. We're not saying that that's what everybody needs to do, but you do need to define the relationship and what you are going to do. And we're telling you, if you're considering getting married, you really need to make sure that you talk through these kinds of details, because it's just unnecessary to get in those kind of scraps and stuff when you're married and not really help define that stuff.
And I think especially if you're engaged or looking toward marriage,
right,
and even certain temperaments in marriage will have a tendency to just say, okay, to certain things they really don't agree with, just to be compliant. And I think what we're saying is it's worth saying, I don't think that that's really a fair fair is maybe not the best word because life isn't fair,
Right.
but not the best in our relationship for us to do it this way. And I'd like to talk more about that. Here's
Sure.
why I think that you should do that instead of me. So I think it's also important for the person who's maybe more of a dominant personality to make sure they're asking, are you okay with what we've decided on? And giving room for the maybe more person that's a little quieter to say, no, I'm really not okay with numbers
Yeah.
3 and 5.
Right.
And I'd like to talk more about that. But then also the one who's quieter needs to give, room for the person who has more to say it.
Sure. And so we will do some premarital coaching circles that we can help you with that and walk through some of that. We're going to roll some of that out so you can be looking for that. If you're interested in that and you're here and you're saying, I'm in a courting period, or we are evaluating whether we
Yes.
should get married, just connect with us. Just follow the instructions on how to connect with us at the end of this, and online you can find us, and we can
It'll all be in the show notes.
yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
So there's so much more we could talk
Right.
about this. There's going to be multiple podcasts that will cover some maybe talk more about some of these things.
Yes.
But I think for today, it's good to wrap it up.
Yeah, maybe we'll come back and do a part 2, and we'll talk even more about maybe the Priscilla Aquila piece and what does it mean to be on mission, and talk a little bit more and fill in some gaps that we left out because we still have a lot more to deal with. So maybe we'll do a part 2 of this.
I mean, that sounds good. So some just takeaways, just reminders. Find something, some type of test that would help you understand your differences in communication, your different love languages. Right. Start there. Talk about it with each other. Don't just do it and keep it to yourself.
Yep.
And ask your spouse, is this true of you? You know,
Yes.
this is what I think. Is this true of you? And then begin practicing
Yes.
I statements in your communication, taking responsibility, fighting fair.
Absolutely.
And all those things we know don't happen overnight.
Right.
So, and you need to know that.
Yes.
So take your time and be gracious and forgiving with that.
Yep. Find some coaches and get in a community that will help support you in this as well.
All right. So until next time, have a good day.
Blessings.